The CB9 Exploding Crossbow. This is an extremely powerful primary, where this weapon deals damage by firing explosive bolts that have the ability and utility to destroy any type of spawner in the game. This includes bug holes, factories, and even illuminate dropships. Because of its explosive radius, its AoE allows the capability to clear chaff and smaller enemies. But because of its damage, it can reliably kill medium enemies like Devastators and Hive Guards with ease. With 8 magazines and 5 bolts per mag, it seems like it has a lot of ammo. And this is even more obvious when you pair it with Siege Ready and bring a supply pack. So this gun's utility and its capabilities makes it clear to me why this weapon is at the top of everybody's tier list for Helldivers 2. If you go anywhere on YouTube, you will see that this specific weapon has been slotted as the highest and the best weapon in the game, even S tier, in my own tier list video. Now, if I'm claiming that the weapon is so good, why am I saying that this specific weapon is a little bit overrated? Firstly, I want to say that I'm not disputing that it doesn't deserve to be S rank. I just think people misunderstand why everyone is putting it at S rank, and the fact that that rating alone does make this a little bit overhyped. Players don't really know what this weapon can do, but most importantly, they don't know what this weapon cannot do. So allow me to explain in more detail what I mean by this. So because this weapon happens to be the top tier weapon for a lot of people's tier list, I think this weapon is kind of overshadowing everything else, but not because of its in-game performance, but more of its place in the community. That the community doesn't really shine light on other weapons. And in order to understand that, you have to understand why everyone picks this gun to be the absolute S tier gun of every single tier list. Firstly, why is because this weapon is like a Swiss Army knife. It can do a little bit of everything. It's a jack of all trades. It closes bug holes, it kills mediums, and it can even kill chaff, which is everything that you want from almost any gun. It works on the bugs, it works on the bots, and it even works on the illuminate for now. And so that is partially the case for why everyone puts it there, because it's a solid option for all 3 factions. The crossbow has a great use case against the bugs because you can stand on top of ridges for bug hives and clear them out really, really easily. And it even helps with heavy hives and the new variants, and even mega nests. It's not the best against the bot since you do have better alternatives, but it still can destroy factories in a pinch. And this also still works with the illuminate. Although not as effective as some other weapons, it is the most effective primary at destroying illuminate ships. Realistically, what I'm highlighting though is that this weapon has one of the highest utility in the game, and the only one that can really be compared to the crossbow is the eruptor, because all of the same things that the crossbow can do, the eruptor does, but it just lags a little bit behind. The only real advantage the crossbow has against the eruptor is its fire rate, its one-handed weapon trait, and it has more mags. Otherwise, these would be almost identical weapons. And so what I'm trying to say is that this is a primary that's kind of a support weapon in disguise. But so that's why everyone is choosing this weapon to be their S tier rank. And so I really want to get into why I think it's overrated, especially since I've had almost 1,000 hours in the game. I've played this game since launch, and I have had my fair share of use with this. And I used to be a fan of the crossbow before they even buffed it during the 60-day patch. So firstly, I want to talk about this weapon's drawbacks. Now, anyone who knows this weapon understands that if you shoot at enemies that are close by you, the AoE or the area effect of the explosive bolt can and will hit you when enemies are too close and up in your face. Now, this isn't a problem with everybody, but that is still a risk that can and will get you killed if you don't use this weapon properly. If you're fighting hunters, for example, against the bugs, this weapon is less than ideal for those type of engagements, and you'll likely want a primary or a secondary to deal with the hunters instead. But if you are using this gun on everything, you're kind of not being careful enough, and you're not using this weapon to its full capabilities. Where the Exploding Crossbow is best at on bugs is against maps with bile spewers, where they're slow, they're a little bit tanky, and because of the explosive bolts, you can take them down in 2 hits. And so that's one drawback. The other is it has somewhat low fire rate compared to other primaries. It's still faster than the Eruptor, but its fire rate is slow enough that you still have to wait for the bolts to move. So basically what happens is, in between shots, you're waiting for a couple seconds and then you shoot again. This issue is more prevalent on the Eruptor, but the crossbow still has this issue. And it's less of an issue when you are using this weapon to clear hives and objectives, but more of an issue when you're actually dealing with crowds. Although people may think that this weapon overshadows the grenade launcher, the one thing that the grenade launcher has as a support weapon that this primary doesn't have is the fire rate. So, as I was saying earlier, this kind of is somewhat clunky. It's not as smooth as other weapons, and it certainly isn't as fast as other weapons too, where it's all about knowing where to shoot your bolts and using the splash damage from the AoE to get rid of crowds effectively. And that requires a little bit of skill, where some other guns, at least against certain factions, I feel like have an advantage. So you do have to think a lot more tactically. It is somewhat brain dead when you are fighting medium enemies because you just shoot straight at them to deal with them. But everything else, you kind of have to understand exactly what you're doing. Now, the next part isn't really a drawback with the weapon itself, it's a drawback with your squad. If everyone takes this weapon in the entire squad, then you are all specializing into one specific area, and that's basically a utility primary. And there's nothing that says that you have to take a different primary if somebody's already taken the crossbow, but I highly recommend it, because one thing that the crossbow lacks in group play is close quarters combat, where it's not a close weapon. So this has a lot of friendly fire damage if you're all huddled together and enemies start to swarm you from every angle. And if you all only have this weapon, you're kind of not playing the squad right. So I highly recommend choosing any of the other suggestions that I give you guys in this video for your squad's sake, so that you can save some of your teammates without having to worry about an enemy right next to them, that because you shot that enemy, you're going to blow them up also. But so, going back to the idea that this weapon is a Swiss Army knife, I wanted to create this concept of specialty guns, where the crossbow, it specializes mainly in utility, where its job is to destroy mediums and spawners. But I wanted to point out some of the other primaries in the game that I think are specific faction specialist weapons, where these weapons focus on one particular faction and work on that faction really, really well. Now, I'm not really including the Illumina in this comparison because they're not all the way out yet, but I will mention them a little bit. When I do the comparison here with the weapons, the first thing I want to go to is the bugs, because there's a lot of weapons that you can take that are just as effective, if not more, than the actual Exploding Crossbow. So, first thing I want to talk about is this is my other S tier pick for Helldivers 2, but it is entirely, almost completely, a bug specialist gun. And that is the Arc 12 Blitzer, where this gun specializes against the bugs because it has an extremely short range. But it has infinite ammo, it does a lot of damage, and it stuns, so it prevents the horde from walking up to you. And because of that stun, it even works against the Predator strain and allows you to have some easy mop-up kills even against the new enemy that is supposedly more challenging than any other type of enemy. And in one of my latest videos, I showcased a build with this weapon in mind and paired it with a bunch of other synergizing components. And I didn't die once in 2 entire missions. This is one of the best bug guns in the entire game because The bugs have like near limitless enemies, and this one has infinite ammo. And so it is a horde clearing menace. But where this gun struggles with is bile spears. That's about it. It struggles, but it's not impossible for this thing to take out bile spears. It will still stun them, and you can still hit them over and over. That's just one example of a gun that I think specializes in a certain category against a certain faction that makes it really powerful and probably more worth it to take than the crossbow. But the problem with specialization guns that the crossbow doesn't have is that the crossbow can be used effectively on other factions as well, where this is a little bit less effective against the Illuminate since everything's flying, and the bots where everything is farther away. The next bug specialty weapon is the Flam 66 Torture. Now this is basically your support weapon Torture, but in your primary slot. And so it's a very, very good weapon. It's super good against the bugs, and it's almost more worth it to take than the actual support weapon version of the flamethrower. Your canisters are a little bit smaller, but it's roughly the same. And this weapon is great. You can kill chargers with it. You can kill Bile Titans with it if you're crazy enough. And it doesn't work on the Illuminate or the bots because those are all too far away from you. Where the Illuminate fly overhead, the bots stand farther away. But it's a great and one of the best bug primaries in the entire game. And then for the bots, this is one of the best specialty bot guns in the entire game, and it's the Diligence Counter Sniper. Now the reason is that this has enough damage to one-tap every single Devastator and Chaff in the entire game. So the majority of the bot enemies you fight, this thing takes care of. And that is just as true with the Diligence as it is with the Diligence Counter Sniper. Now, probably one of the most obvious comparisons for this video is going to be the Plaz 101 Purifier. Now, this weapon has a charge up that fires a blast that explodes on impact. And that explosion is pretty much the same explosion that would come from a explosive crossbow bolt. But the only thing that you're trading for with this weapon is that utility. This weapon cannot destroy factories and cannot destroy bug holes. It simply just focuses on mobs. The fact that you can get a explosive for all 15 shots in your mag is nuts to me. It's a very powerful weapon. Now, this isn't quite a bot specialist gun. You can use it against the Illuminate, and you can use it against the bugs. You're just sacrificing that utility. And so it's a very powerful contender against the crossbow, and probably the most obvious contender for the crossbow. And then there's the Dominator, which this gun is, in my opinion, a bot specialist gun, because this gun staggers, it does a lot of damage, and it has around 15 bullets in its magazine, which makes this gun a really heavy-hitting bot gun. Because what this gun does is it one-taps everything in the head, including Devastators, but if you miss, it staggers them and prevents them from hitting you. And so that is an extremely desirable trait for this weapon because the bots shoot back, and if you stagger them, they don't shoot at you anymore, or they don't shoot accurately. And so it's one of the most effective guns to use. But that's about it. These are all of the specialty guns in my opinion, and they are all great and all vastly getting overshadowed by the crossbow ranking. I feel like the crossbow is good. It deserves to be up there, but it's not the best per faction. The guns that I think are the best per faction are these specialty weapons like the Blitzer for the bugs and the Diligence Counter Sniper or Dominator for the bots. And the Purifier is a great alternative to the crossbow, and the Double-Edged Sickle is a great alternative as well. They all have their own unique playstyle, and all are extremely fun to use. And so my hope is that with this video, you understand that I'm making this video not to complain about the crossbow, not to undervalue it either. It's to hopefully communicate to you that you don't need to pick the crossbow just because everyone's saying it's the best for every faction, because it's not the best for each faction individually, and I hope that's understandable. You can have some creative freedom on what you bring and what you want to do, It's kind of a weapons sandbox. That's what Helldivers is. So that's about all I have to say about this weapon. Let me know what primaries you take in the comments. I'm very interested in knowing what people in this game like to bring and what their favorite primary is. And if you still enjoy the crossbow and it's still your favorite weapon, by all means, still share it. It's not like you're not allowed to like this gun. You absolutely are. I just wanted more people to be aware that there are other options that you can pick that are just as effective. Now, if you like this video, be sure to leave a like. And if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. It helps a ton and it means a lot.